uh, passion I shared with you is well-being, and essentially just totally thinking about how can we be happy and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya. That simply means let all be happy and Lord be healthy. And I realize that everybody wants that. So all the work we are doing ultimately leads to that. How can we be happy and healthy? So my
Right.
question is, what does well-being mean to you?
Well, I thought about it a little bit, and I think it has to do with being able to accept life just as it is, being emotionally fit, being physically fit, being spiritually fit, having the relationships you need so that whatever comes along in life, you are able to accept it. You have the resiliency, you have the flexibility, you can take the ups with the downs, you can take what you think might be special and good and have humility. You can be grateful for each day as it comes. And that's what well being means to me, being able to be grateful for every day just as it shows up.
Lovely. So tell me, what advice would you give to the corporate leaders? How can they create a well-being culture? Because
Well,
everyone these days
right.
is talking about that.
I love that question. First of all, I think asking the question and talking about it more and more is part of the answer. And what I would say is that we all have to turn to our humanity.
Mhm.
Over the years, you and I have talked a lot about spirituality,
Mhm.
and we did the spiritual partnership, we did transformational leadership together. And what I have learned in my life is too many people jump to the spiritual and forget the human. We miss the emotional intelligence that's needed to really connect with people. And so, what I would say to leaders, and I do say to my executive clients, is build a culture of humanity,
Mhm.
one that really honors people at different ages and stages of their life, that creates space for whether they're having children or they're taking care of parents, or one of my clients recently, uh, an executive assistant lost a son, who was in his 40s. Well, she just needed to take time off, and he made sure she had it. And so, building cultures that honor the human dimensions of life will create well being. And some people need help filling in what they don't get at home. They maybe didn't have a happy home life. And so they need to be able to talk about what's going on in their life. Or maybe they're going through a relationship breakup and they need companionship. But letting all of that messy part of life be part of the work environment. Um, I have, for a long time, I have taught we're moving away from command and control leadership and to well being leadership. But let's look at what was trying to be controlled. And that was the human element.
Mhm.
We tried to limit and put people and their emotions and their excitement into boxes so they could just be efficient or effective. And what we need now is to find ways of living with each other and working with each other in our greatness. And that's not little, right? So rather than trying to make people small to do a job, We want to embrace their greatness and help them be the best people they can be. And that means really understanding, like we do in families, not everybody is at the same place all the time,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? We've got young ones, we've got middle agers, we've got old ones, and all of that together makes a good life.
Hmm. Lovely, what a lovely thought. So let's create organizations which are more humane, more accommodating. And how the key question these days is collaboration. How can we collaborate together? And how do you apply the appreciative inquiry and creating a spiritual partner? How will that help create a more collaborative culture?
Oh, well, that's very interesting. Well, appreciative inquiry has some kind of principles that are just really important. First of all, we begin by doing inquiry. We could call it research, we could call it asking questions, but doing inquiry into the situation when it's at its best. And so, for example, we might say, tell me about a time in your life where you felt you had a spiritual partner,
Mhm,
a spiritual partnership that really supported you and nurtured you, and you were able to support and nurture the other. And we'd ask that question, we'd study that. And from there, we can say, okay, now, what do we want to do more of? Because we have a foundation of what works. So,
mhm,
appreciative inquiry starts with a real curiosity about what's working in life.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and unfortunately, the habits of journalism, the habits of management, of medicine, so many habits of our society focus on what's not working,
mhm,
what's the problem, what's broken. And, you know, Dinesh, a lot of that is so that then people can be fixers, they can make it right. But that's taking care of somebody else's business instead of your own. And so it's very important also to stay connected with yourself,
mhm, mhm,
all of yourself, and especially your soul self,
mhm,
your
mhm,
higher self. And so, really knowing who you are internally, recognizing that you change over years. Um, and some of you doesn't change. Darn it. But that we do have our core self, our higher self, our soul self, whatever we want to call that. And ultimately, the goal of a good life, of well being, is to have that self in the driver's seat and not our greed and our ego and our jealousy. But we want that self that looks out on the world and says, oh, I have compassion for the pain. I'm sorry for all that's not working well, but I am going to stay in my light and I am going to continue shining it on people.
Beautiful, beautiful. Amazingly that I arrived at just about the same conclusion, and my take on that is that let's have a spiritual partnership with our own self. So
Oh,
so like the two wolves inside us, one
right.
like you just described, one telling us to be fearful, others showing us courage. So when both of our self and our spiritual being, our higher self, when we make a partner with them, maybe
Yes.
a partnership between our ego and our soul, to put it more directly.
Yes.
Yeah? And once we are at peace, once we are harmonizing, now I look to partnership with another human being. And it's easier for me to develop that partnership. Now, one question I struggle with, in a regular business partnership, we have our boundary lines, and you cross my boundary line, and you are out. In our personal lives, we are more generous, we are more forgiving, we give chance, maybe one chance, two chance, and then you are out. But in a spiritual partnership, how many chances is that? Like a infinite chances in this lifetime?
Oh,
No matter
oh,
how many times you do the same thing, I still hold you with compassion, and I forgive you, and I keep nurturing you. Or I say, are we striving for that infinite possibility and the infinite love, the unconditional love we talk about? Or
right.
we are to, in business, we say no, we are drawing our boundary lines. How far can we go with a spiritual partnership with ourselves and with others?
Well,
Can we be
first,
infinitely
I
compassionate to ourselves?
I love the idea of making the spiritual partnership with ourselves.
Mhm,
Starting there, um, understanding and embracing all of ourself. The angry self, the hurt little kid, the one that's fighting for social justice. Embracing everything in ourself lets us then be open to embrace it in other people. And I think this question of, where are our boundaries? Um, business, probably sometimes boundaries are too tight.
mhm,
We misunderstand, we blame people, we think we have a boundary when in fact we should have been more open and compassionate and understanding. Um, I have a client right now who just said to me, my HR person is coming to life. He is doing such a good job. And after a year of inviting him in, he's now coming into the conversation. He's doing fantastic. But what my client discovered is that the other executive that the HR person reported to was not managing him well,
mhm,
right? So it's not always one person, it's the relational dynamics. And those relational dynamics exist inside of us as well as with people. So we start with our own spiritual partnerships. We find that range of boundaries. And
mhm,
what came to my mind when you were talking is I think there are times where we love, but from a distance. One, two, three strikes, you're out. Now, I'm not going to stop praying for you. I'm not going to stop, you know, hoping you're doing well, but I am going to stop calling you, trying to get your attention, trying to take care of you because it hasn't worked.
mhm,
So, um, learning how to what stay in the relational field, but with enough distance that's safe.
mhm,
That's safe, and that's particularly true for a lot of women. I don't know for men, but a lot of women have to step away from abuse. They have to step away from relationships that try to keep them down, right? And make space for themselves so that they can connect with themselves spiritually, which means connecting with their highest power. So that question of boundaries is a very good one, very important, and I think it's a continuum.
And as I was listening to you, uh, the thought came to me that it probably same for men as well, all
Ah,
human beings. Uh, However, one thing I noticed, to the degree I can stretch boundaries with my own self, because myself also has exactly the same dilemmas, same thing.
yes.
Some habits I have, I'm not able to change, and I'm angry at myself why I'm not able to change, and I'm punishing myself. uh, if I could be compassionate with my own self and stretch my own boundary, and say, okay, even though you're not able to do it, I still love you. To
Right.
the same degree, I'm perhaps being kind to other people as well. So my boundary, when I move my internal boundaries, I'll probably stretch my external boundaries as well. And in that process, I think I'm growing as a human being. I'm growing as a more and more evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you
Mm-hmm.
look at more evolved human beings, their boundaries are amazing. And
Open and porous,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yes. Yes.
So our own well-being, how we relate to others and how we collaborate, how can we function well in business and in society, will a lot will depend on how well we are loving our own self.
I think that's very true. Very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And how well, and what that means, it's not just a general love of self. It means doing that internal work, what sometimes is called psychological work,
Mhm.
to discover your parts, to discover the voices in you, some of which you might not like. So be curious about them so that you can love them and welcome them. We grow up thinking, I have to be good. I have to do this so that my parents will like me, so that I can get good grades. And we punish ourselves. And so getting to know our psychological self is foundational for accepting, having the emotional intelligence to then live with ourselves spiritually.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, Dana, one more question I'll bring. Many people I find, and business world especially, uh, there is a kind of an intellectual uh, arrogance, should we say, know-it-all tendency. And I think if you have that mindset, if you're not willing to process new ideas, new concepts, then it becomes extremely difficult. And the same thing I find in well-being area. In there
Mm.
are some. Uh, what advice would you give for somebody? Why should they try a new idea? Uh, Fundamental question.
Well, you know, um, golly, I think there's two parts to your question.
Mhm,
One is, why should someone stop talking as if they're the expert and
mhm,
listen? All
mhm,
right, that's part of that question. Learning to really stop being the expert
mhm,
and listen, listen, listen. And then the second part is try something new, right? So both of those are important. And the first one is in many ways more important for relational well being because nobody can be the expert of me.
mhm,
I
mhm.
don't care how great your ideas are, how great my ideas are. They just aren't right for everybody.
Correct.
And so, what's important is to be able to, like you're doing today, ask these wonderful questions and listen and probe. And that's where we learn. When we learn, we grow. When we grow, we change. And so, I think the question is, how do I build, how does a person build self reflection so they know when they're acting like an expert?
Mhm,
Oh, and be willing to say, I'm curious, what do you think? How do you see this situation? What could you imagine we could do? And from there, um, a lot of new things are open to try.
mhm,
And then to be more direct in answering your question, it is a good life practice to try something new every week, every day. I mean, brush your teeth with the other hand. Do you know how hard that is? Oh my gosh. You brush your teeth with your other hand. I'm right handed. If I use my left hand,
mhm.
I get into so much self talk about, oh my God, I'm getting toothpaste all over me. Oh my God, my teeth aren't clean. Oh my God, I can't do this. I'm not coordinated. and it brings up all the negative self talk. And that we can look at and learn and laugh, or just go on your walk in the opposite direction. So there's so many ways that we can simply and elegantly try something new and then be open. It doesn't mean a trip to India, which is what I was doing brand new when I met you, and look what, has unfolded in my life.
So I think if we can really integrate a lot of points you have made today, then certainly we can be very happy. And I think spiritual wellness alone can make us happy. But then now the healthy part comes. I have found a lot of people who are spiritually very uh, aligned and uh, growing and well, yet they're not in good physical health.
Yes.
So for what, how do we care for our body as well? And why
Well,
is it important?
it's very interesting that you would say that because if I look at the United States, a lot of people are into health and wellness, but they have forgotten their spirituality.
Right. Mm.
And if we look at India, there are people there who are so spiritually attuned, and yet they have forgotten their body
Mhm.
or never learned. And so the question is, how do we build that bridge? Um, I, I personally think that we we are spirits embodied, and so it is a spiritual practice to care for my body.
Mhm.
It's my body's home. I mean, my spirit's home. But it doesn't mean pushing it with exercise. It doesn't mean I have to be the strongest. It means resting when I get a signal that I need rest. It means eating healthy food, but every once in a while having fun and eating ice cream
Mhm.
because joy and fun is good, but really tuning in spiritually to what this home needs, this physical body, what it needs, and allow it its own process. I imagine your sister is really having some conversations with her body these days,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Um,
And by the way, she is doing extremely well. And uh, and I
Good.
call it what you just described so beautifully. I think the thought comes to me is the yoga of East and West. If we
Yes.
can, yoga is union, and union of Eastern thinking and Western thinking, if we can bring it together and we care for our body, which is the temple for our soul, and we care
Yes.
for our spirit, then I think we can be happy and healthy. And this has been a lovely conversation. And as always, Diana, dialogue with you means some new emergent thoughts. So I think I'm going with this thought of discipline, of course, and yoga.
I
Of
like the thought of yoga.
yes, the yoga of body and mind, yoga of East and West, and essentially, if we can just continue to ask that question, how can I care for the temple of my
Mm,
body is my temple, exactly. And then
right.
I find that integrity, when we lead a life of integrity and responsibility, then I can sleep better. Because now I don't have to remember what I said to whom.
Well, that's very true.
All
And
right.
it's interesting, Dinesh. I don't know if you've ever looked at my book, Appreciative Leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the things that I
You
wrote
gave me a
about,
copy, signed copy. So yes, I do.
oh, so you have it. Good. I'm glad I didn't miss that one. Um, but I wrote about integrity as one of the five key, I called them strategies because it was a business book, but five things. And what's interesting about integrity, if you think of the word, Integrity is to be integral.
Mhm,
Integral is to be whole. Whole is to be healthy.
mhm.
So the word healing, health, integrated, integrity, it's all the same meaning. So spiritual well being is indeed about integrity. Global integrative wellness, integrity right at the heart of
So now,
everything.
now you know why we chose the name Global Integrative Wellness Network.
Got it. Good. Very, very
Precisely.
good.
Now, let me take you to a little harder place. Uh, for the business people, the next forgiveness, which brings acceptance. Is it the appropriate word in the business world,
I
or is
believe
it a too
so.
spiritual word?
No, I believe it's an essential word
Okay.
for the business world. Forgiveness, absolutely. And again, like so much else, it starts with forgiveness of self,
Mhm,
right? Because if we do get off our integrity mark,
mhm, mhm,
then we've also got to forgive ourselves because that's part of being human,
mhm.
right? And then forgiving others. Absolutely. Important practice, important discipline, and very appropriate word for the business world.
Well, why should I forgive someone? People, they have done a crime, and they should be punished,
Oh, that's
especially
a,
in business world.
yeah, it's a big, I think to say someone has done a crime,
They stole company property.
they stole company property, they embezzled, they did things like that, um, they should be punished and they should be forgiven.
Okay. Okay.
Both, both. It's not either or.
Mhm,
And the forgiveness is what heals you
mhm,
because you feel taken advantage of, you feel betrayed, you feel resentment, all the things that you feel because this person did something not okay. And so by forgiving, it's for yourself.
mhm,
It helps you put things in, the Buddhists would say, right relationship, and then you move on. That person has to have the consequences of their actions,
mhm.
right? Consequences are very, very important.
Okay. And now I come to the ultimate in our spiritual wellness is surrender, the sense of surrendering our ego. When we go to a church, when we go to a temple, we always vow, we surrender. What are we surrendering? We're surrendering our ego to a higher altar, right? So, is that for business world? Surrendering your ego?
I don't I don't think I don't think surrender your ego. It's not part of my narrative.
Hmm, hmm.
I do think put your ego in its appropriate place
Okay.
is really appropriate. And in the business world, there are times when you just need your ego. You need to lean into the strength of your character, the strength of your ego, the confidence that you can do it. That's appropriate,
Hmm, hmm.
right? And there are other times where you go, oh, I'm fighting and there's no need for a fight.
Okay.
I'm the one that has to step back this time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really cherish the Buddhist idea of right relationship,
Hmm, hmm.
and that there's, again, a broad understanding. Um, Ego comes out of a certain body of thinking, and yes, spirituality says you're supposed to, and I think maybe mostly Eastern spirituality says, surrender your ego. Um, I think it's put your ego in its appropriate place.
Very, very well said. Very well said. And I think the Vedantic idea also gives you a concept of being a witness, being an observer. I
Yes.
found that to be very useful. If, right, let's say you and I are having a conflict, And if I could be a witness, I could see Dinesh's thought, Dinesh's mind, how it's working. And if I could see Diana's mind, how that is working, then I think going above both of them, it becomes very easy to find a solution.
Right.
So being a witness, and I think Buddhist philosophy, the Eastern philosophy, the Western philosophy, they all kind of, in their roundabout ways, they all talk about being a witness, being an observer. Is that correct?
I think that's important. And something, quite frankly, I think you've been able to do better than I over the 30 years that I've known you. Because I like to get in there, right? And um, I think there's no doubt being able to create that distance and watch what's going on in yourself, of yourself, of the other person, with the other person. You know, so much of the world, if we go back to your first question about well being, it's about relationships. People want to know that they're okay in the eyes of other people. They want to know that they're important in the eyes of other people, in the organization, that they have an important contribution, and they want to know that they're loved. So,
Mhm.
well being is, oh, essential. It's
Feeling
just
loved,
essential.
feeling loved in an organization by my colleagues.
How
And I
about
think
that?
all the things you have said, integrity, responsibility, and forgiveness and surrender ultimately, or being an observer. Because if I'm observing both of us, then there's nothing but I'll have love for both of us. I can feel love
Right,
for Dinesh and I can feel love for Diana
right.
because now I'm observing both of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, well-being is developing that sense, that responsibility. This has been a lovely dialogue, Diana,
Thank you very
and
much,
I
Dinesh. It's
really
a
enjoyed.
pleasure.
Yeah. Any other parting thoughts?
Um, no, but we just have to do it before the 30 years the next time.
Well, let's plan I'm doing a spiritual partnership retreat this Sunday, actually, here in
Good.
Bay Area. And I was thinking about the retreat we did 30 years ago, how what has transpired since then. But I'd love to do a spiritual partnership retreat again. When you're ready, we'll do it maybe uh, name a place.
Perfect.
All
Sounds wonderful.
right.
All right. I'm on to my day. You're
Have a
on to
lovely
your
day.
day. You
Have a
too.
have a lovely
Thank
day.
you
Namaste.
very much.
Namaste.
Namaste.